you ever find yourself wondering what the Bible really says about things like angels, hell, tattoos, drinking, or even aliens? A lot of people do. We know because we asked. Each week, our senior pastor, Jim White, will tackle what you told us you most want to know about what the Bible really says. Be sure to join us in person or online to find out the most popular topics you voted for that we'll be talking about.
Well, welcome to Meck's online campus. Today we start a series called What the Bible Really Says About, and then we let you fill in the blank. Through our various social media platforms, we asked you over the last several weeks to be submitting what you would like to hear talked about in a series with that kind of title. We left it completely open-ended, so you just were able to give us whatever you most wanted to know what the Bible really says about, well, anything. And you told us, a lot of you, and a lot of different issues. This series is going to tackle the 5 most requested issues you asked for. We're working our way from number 5 up to number 1. And in the spirit of absolutely shamelessly baiting you and manipulating, that means you'll have to dial in every week to find out what is next on our list. Or actually next on your collective list, because it's your list, whether I like it or not. So let's kick it off with what was the 5th most requested issue to explore. Here's a little video introduction.
Picture this, a machine that could organize your cupboard just as you like it, or serve every member of the house a customized cup of coffee. Makes your day easier, doesn't it? These are the products of artificial intelligence. But why use the term artificial intelligence? Well, these machines are artificially incorporated with human-like intelligence to perform tasks as we do. This intelligence is built using complex algorithms and mathematical functions. But AI may not be as obvious as in the previous examples. In fact, AI is used in smartphones, cars, social media feeds, video games, banking, surveillance, and many other aspects of our daily life. The real question is, what does an AI do at its core? Here is a robot we built in our lab, which is now dropped onto a field. In spite of a variation in lighting, landscape, and dimensions of the field, the AI robot must perform as expected. This ability to react appropriately to a new situation is called generalized learning. The robot is now at a crossroad, one that is paved and the other rocky. The robot must determine which path to take based on the circumstances. This portrays the robot's reasoning ability. After a short stroll, the robot now encounters a stream that it cannot swim across. Using the plank provided as an input, the robot is able to cross this stream. So, our robot uses the given input and finds the solution for a problem. This is problem solving. These 3 capabilities make the robot artificially intelligent. In short, AI provides machines with the capability to adapt, reason, and provide solutions. Well, now that we know what AI is, let's have a look at the 2 broad categories an AI is classified into. Weak AI, also called narrow AI, focuses solely on one task. For example, AlphaGo is a maestro of the game Go, but you can't expect it to be even remotely good at chess. This makes AlphaGo a weak AI. You might say Alexa is definitely not a weak AI, since it can perform multiple tasks. Well, that's not really true. When you ask Alexa to play Despacito, it picks up the keywords play and Despacito, and runs a program it is trained to. Alexa cannot respond to a question it isn't trained to answer. For instance, try asking Alexa the status of traffic from work to home. Alexa cannot provide you this information, as she is not trained to. And that brings us to our second category of AI, strong AI. Now, this is much like the robots that only exist in fiction as of now. Ultron from Avengers is an ideal example of a strong AI. That's because it's self-aware and eventually even develops emotions. This makes the AI's response unpredictable. You must be wondering, well, how is artificial intelligence different from machine learning and deep learning? We saw what AI is. Machine learning is a technique to achieve AI, and deep learning, in turn, is a subset of machine learning. Machine learning provides a machine with the capability to learn from data and experience through algorithms. Deep learning does this learning through ways inspired by the human brain. This means through deep learning, data and patterns can be better perceived. Ray Kurzweil, a well-known futurist, predicts that by the year 2045, we would have robots as smart as humans. This is called the point of singularity. Well, that's not all. In fact, Elon Musk predicts that the human mind and body will be enhanced by AI implants, which would make us partly cyborgs. For now, AI is built to work with humans and make our tasks easier. However, with the maturation of technology, we can only wait and watch what the future of AI holds for us. Well, that is artificial intelligence for you in short.
Well, there you have it. Our first topic. What does the Bible really say about AI? And the answer is nothing. So let me close this in a word of prayer. Actually, not so fast. While the words artificial intelligence never appear in the pages of the Bible, there are things in the Bible that speak to artificial intelligence, that help us think about it. This is where what the Bible specifically says and what it implicitly says comes into play. In other words, where what's known as biblical theology takes over. Where thinking about what the Bible does say about certain things helps us apply that specifically to a subject and help us think about that subject biblically. Even something like artificial intelligence. So, let's jump in. First, let's talk a little bit more about the nature of AI, because that'll provide the context for how the Bible kind of plugs into it. In his book, Life 3.0, which is on being human in an age of artificial intelligence, Max Tegmark, who is a professor at MIT, classifies life into 3 levels of sophistication. He calls them life 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0. And in talking about those levels of life, he uses the terms hardware and software. And hardware refers to matter, software refers to intelligence or information. In Life 1.0, you'd have something like bacteria. When it comes to hardware or matter, it can't create itself. When it comes to software or information, it can't create that either. It can't create the information it accesses. Now, Life 2.0 where he would put human beings. When it comes to our hardware or matter, we can't create ourselves. But when it comes to our software or information, we can. We have the ability to create the information we have access to. We didn't design ourselves, our hardware, but we can design our information, our software. He then goes forward and says that Life 3.0 is life that can design not only its software, but also its hardware. In other words, Life 3.0 is the master of its own reality, master of its own destiny, free from any and all naturalistic shackles. He puts artificial intelligence there. Artificial intelligence is Life 3.0. The term artificial intelligence was actually first coined back in the mid-1950s by a Dartmouth mathematician named John McCarthy. Rudimentary forms of AI are already with us in everything from facial recognition software in Apple's latest phones to our digital assistants like Siri, Alexa. But the holy grail is AGI, or artificial general intelligence, which is artificial intelligence reaching human-level intelligence and beyond, being able to accomplish virtually any goal, including learning. So in short, Life 1.0 would be biological, 2.0 would be cultural, 3.0 would be technological. And the speed with which AI is entering our world is just breathtaking. It was only about 16 months ago that the San Francisco Artificial Intelligence Lab released GPT, which seems like now that's just part of our life. That's a chat box that answers questions in clear, concise prose. As you probably know, it immediately caused a sensation, with millions using it to create everything from poetry to high school term papers. I think it was even used to create some rewrites of some old Queen songs. This is just now the world in which we live. Technology that uses AI to generate texts and images and sounds and other media in response to short prompts. This promises to reinvent everything, from online search engines like Google to photo and graphics editors like Photoshop and digital assistants, as mentioned, like Alexa and Siri. Ultimately, it could provide an entirely new way of interacting with almost any software, letting people chat with computers and other devices as if they were chatting with another human being. Almost like what you would see in the oldest Star Trek series where they would talk directly to the computer. This holds possibilities for enormous good and dramatic breakthroughs in technology. So, what's not to like, right? Well, let's state the obvious. Technology is anything but benign. Remember that classic line from the original Jurassic Park movie? The character played by Jeff Goldblum, Dr. Ian Malcolm, when confronted with the technology to bring the dinosaurs back to life, said, and I quote, "Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could that they didn't stop to think if they should." Or even more to the point, when reminded by the owner of Jurassic Park that, hey, when Disneyland first opened, hardly anything worked either. He said, yeah, but if the Pirates of the Caribbean breaks down, the pirates don't eat the tourists. This is why Harvard University and MIT, along with a lot of other leading schools, now offer courses on the ethics and regulation of artificial intelligence. And well, they should. When it comes to AI, almost all agree that the goal should not be just undirected intelligence. It should be beneficial intelligence. The main concern, though, isn't with runaway robots like you would see in Terminator or something like that, but with intelligence itself. Because intelligence can be positive or negative. It can be helpful or destructive. Here's the progression that is keeping some people up at night. Step one, you build human-level artificial general intelligence. Step two, you use that AGI to create superintelligence. And then step three, you use or unleash that superintelligence to take over the world. Tegmark notes that since we humans have managed to dominate life's other forms by outsmarting them, it's completely possible that we could be similarly outsmarted and dominated by superintelligence. I know, this is the stuff of science fiction movies, but this is where science fiction and science are now becoming one and the same. And it's why Tesla and SpaceX founder Elon Musk is not a fan. He once told the National Governors Association that his own exposure to AI technology suggests that it is a fundamental risk to the existence of human civilization. Before he died, cosmologist Stephen Hawking agreed, saying that AI could prove to be the worst event in the history of civilization. Now, obviously, not everybody in the tech world agrees with them, but there is a divide on just where AI could go, or more to the point, where AI could take itself. So how should we begin to think about all this? Is AI really 3.0 in terms of advancement? Is it really a new form of life that supersedes human beings? What does looking what the Bible has to say help us think about all this? Well, first, let's go for low-hanging fruit. Let's state the obvious. Christians believe the Bible to be God's revelation to us, revealing to us things we need to know for life. Much of it is ethical in nature, how we should live, how we should treat others, the differences between right and wrong, good and bad, true and false. What if that isn't transplanted into AI? What if an ethic, a worldview, uses AI for evil? Think about something like facial recognition. It can be used to locate fugitive criminals. That's a good thing. It can also suppress political dissidents in a totalitarian regime. Not a good thing. Various apps and platforms can anticipate our preferences, which can be a good thing. It can also harvest data that invades our privacy. Not a good thing. One of the leading Christian thinkers on all things AI is Oxford professor John Lennox. Lennox notes that every technological innovation has the potential for good or evil. The goal isn't for a Christian to resist technological advances, but to control that advance and then set it into an ethical framework. That's the goal. Now, let me give you an example of morality in AI. Think of a self-driving car. This is technology we already have. It faces a life and death situation. It can swerve away from hitting a pedestrian, or it can save the life of the occupants in the car. It can and will decide, but on what basis are we going to have it decide? Or are we just going to let it decide? See, as we grow in our dependence on AI, we're going to need to increasingly allow it to make our decisions for us. That's actually part of the goal. That's kind of what we're after with AI. But that's going to include ethical decisions. Even just basic things with AI, like self-driving cars, are going to be filled with ethical decision-making. The more AI is able to think independently, the more we will have to face where we're going to limit its autonomy, if we're even able to limit its autonomy. We also have another issue, which is, well, where does responsibility for AI lie? I mean, if we outsource responsibility to AI and something goes wrong, who's at fault? This is going to plague the judicial system. Is AI responsible for something that happens, or is the one who outsourced it to AI responsible? Legally, this is going to be new ground. So the Bible would first raise the ethical concern that we can't just have an ethics-free AI. But ethics are not all there is to think about. This gets higher up and deeper in pretty quick. There is the very understanding of what it means to be human, or as talked about in theological circles, the doctrine of humanity. The Bible has some very specific things to say about our nature and our identity, rooted in creation itself. Let me give you the Cliff Notes version from one single verse in the book of Genesis, but it's power-packed. So God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. In that one declaration are two of the most provocative and important ideas ever introduced about what it means to be human. Here's the first one. We were created. The language of Genesis is, yes, prose narrative. It's an epic poem. It wasn't trying to be a scientific treatise, so it doesn't get into how we were created. But no matter how poetically it was described, the point was clear. God created human beings. And all throughout the Bible, that idea is repeated over and over and over again. God created us, which means that if you are a Christ follower, someone who believes in and lives by the Bible, you are by necessity a creationist. As Christians, we believe that we were wonderfully and carefully designed, that the entire creative process was miraculously and supernaturally generated and guided by God, whatever that process may have been. That's a headline, and it creates an intellectual divide. It's the divide between a naturalistic view of the universe that sees nature as all that there is and a theistic view of the universe that remains very much open to the existence and activity of a God and believes in the existence and activity of God interacting in and with the universe. So, do you have a creative process without a God or a creative process with a God? The Bible says there has been a creative process with a God, and we are the result of it. That's first. Here's a second big idea. Not only were we made in the very image of God. Again, let me read those words from Genesis again. So God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. What does it mean to be made in the image of God? Does it mean that we just physically look like him? That's what image means? No, the Bible tells us God is spirit. Okay, does it mean that we think? He's a thinking being, we're thinking beings, and it seems like we think differently than all the other animals and plants and insects. So does it mean that we think that way? That's what a lot of people used to think set human beings apart from the rest of creation. That's why we called ourselves Homo sapiens. Homo sapien is Latin for thinking being. But no, that's not what the Bible's after either. That's not what the image is about. Here's what the Bible teaches. To be made in the image of God means that when God made us, he put something of himself in us. He gave us a spark of the eternal, a portion of the divine. He gave us a soul. And that soul is what allows us to do what only humans can do, which is to be in a relationship with the living God. that is decisive to who and what we are. Nothing else in all of creation carries a standing or holds the position of bearing the image of God. Not plants, not animals, not reptiles, not insects, not fish, not birds, and certainly not artificial intelligence. When it comes to humans, we alone were made in the image of God, with a soul, able to respond to and relate with the living God. That's why every single human being, every single one, has absolutely incalculable value. Because they're image bearers. It doesn't matter what color their skin is, how much money they make, where they live in the world, or the state of their mental or physical capacity or capability. God has given them value because he's given them his image. They're image bearers. They have that soul. Every human being is of incalculable value and significance because they were made in the very image of God. They bear the image of God. That's what gives human life its sanctity. It's why we can say slavery is wrong, and human trafficking is wrong, and murder is wrong, and racism is wrong, and sexism is wrong. Anything that would demean the value and worth of a human being is wrong. Why? Because every single human being is made in the image of God, and as a result, has infinite worth. This answers one of the most pivotal questions of our day, and one directly related to AI. What does it mean to be human? We know we are different from the animals. We know we are different from artificial intelligence, but what constitutes that difference? What makes up the humanness of humans? And where does that humanness come from? And where does human personality come from? Otherwise, we do get very confused about whether or not advanced AI is human or even a form of humanity. This is a problem, though, to answer from a purely naturalistic view of things, because it's difficult to believe that the human personality evolved naturalistically out of a pool of primordial slime. Legs and arms and lungs, maybe, but what is inside of us? That which makes you, consciousness itself. When the philosopher René Descartes attempted to boil down his one and only true starting point for reflection, he came up with that famous phrase, cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. But where does that thinking come from? How are we able to think, reflect, feel, and reason? There's a voice inside my head. There's a personality, a living spirit that I know exists and is tangible and it's real when I think to myself. What is that and where did it come from? Humans really are different than every other living creature. People who say humans are just slightly remodeled chimpanzee-like apes because we share 99.4% of their DNA, so there's not really much difference between human beings and chimps, lose me. I heard somebody once say, if you really believe that yourself, or if you wonder if that's really true, just ask yourself if you would have a chimpanzee babysit one of your children, or if you would date one. The nature of human identity is not about DNA. The nature of human identity is that we were made in the image of God. We have been given a soul, which is why we're incurably spiritual. Really, one of the most interesting manifestations throughout all civilizations is the deep spiritual hunger of men and women. Anthropologists have discovered that human beings are universally spiritual and we're conscious of the idea of God. This was described by Blaise Pascal, the great 17th century mathematician and philosopher, as the God-shaped hole within every human being. If there isn't a God and we evolved naturalistically, that would not make sense. In reflecting on this, C.S. Lewis notes that drives supposedly come about due to the realities of our world. For example, we have an appetite for food, and there is food to satisfy that need. We have this drive to know God, an authentic spiritual hunger, but there's no God. Well, that doesn't make sense. If that were true, we shouldn't have the drive. Why would creatures who evolved by chance as a result of naturalistic causes alone desire and hunger after a creator God? Or even have this thing called a spiritual side to our lives? Now, some have suggested that the answer is not God at all, but a so-called God gene that has been hardwired into our genetic constitutions. But that begs the question, why would a gene like that have ever evolved? Almost everything supposedly evolved for a purpose, for a reason, to meet the demands and realities of life. Some take another tack and say, well, the reason we're so spiritually hungry is simply our desire, our hope for a God. Of course, that was the belief of Sigmund Freud, the father of the psychoanalytic school of psychology. The dilemma is that does not explain the universal desire for God throughout time and across all civilization. At some point, particularly in our modern secular context, you would think that the wish, the desire, the need for God would simply end, but it only grows. It only increases, which makes no naturalistic sense if there is no God. And where do we get our inner sense of morality? You can keep playing this out in terms of what really sets humans apart. Intuitively, each one of us appeals to some sense of right and wrong in our dealings with other people, with others, with the world, and with ourselves. We get up from our seat, for example, on a crowded bus, and someone sits in our place, and we say, wait, that's my seat. I was there first. Okay, when we do that, what are we doing? Well, we're appealing to some behavioral standard that the other person is supposed to know and supposed to accept. And there is surprising consensus from civilization to civilization, culture to culture, as to what is right and to what is wrong. When you study the moral teaching of the ancient Egyptians and Babylonians and Hindus and Chinese and Greeks and Romans, you become amazed at how similar they were to each other morally. For example, selfishness, never admired. Loyalty, always praised. Some may have differed as to whether you should have one wife or 14, but they always agreed you couldn't just have any woman you wanted. I mentioned C.S. Lewis earlier. You may be familiar with that name as it's connected with him, with the Chronicles of Narnia, which he authored. His backstory is fascinating. He was a professor at Oxford and later at Cambridge, and he journeyed in his life from atheism to becoming a Christian. And he once wrote about this whole inner morality issue in terms of his own spiritual journey. He said, "My argument against God was that the universe seemed so cruel and unjust. But how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line." Somehow it seems that we have this innate sense of a straight line, of a right and a wrong within us. Or as Darwin once replied when asked whether man was unique in any way from other life forms, he said, "Well, man is the only animal I know that blushes." Where does that come from, except from an outside source? National Public Radio, NPR, did a story on the most challenging questions facing science. I thought it was a fascinating story. They surveyed this wide range of scientists from different scientific fields, and they surfaced the top 3 questions that scientists themselves say, we don't have an answer. This is what challenges us the most. And here were the 3 questions. The first was, how did life come about? Translation, how did life come from non-life? How did something dead become alive? If everything was once dead, how did life appear? There's no scientific answer. The second question is, what makes us human? We have 3 times more neurons than a gorilla, but our DNAs are almost identical. Many animals have a rudimentary language. They can use tools. They can recognize themselves in mirrors. So what is it that differentiates us from them? There is no scientific answer. And then the third question was, what is consciousness? How is it that the brain generates the self of self? The unique experience that we have of being unique. And why is there a consciousness at all? There are no scientific answers. But while there are no scientific answers to any of those questions, there are theological ones. And here it is. So God created human beings in his own image, in the image of God. He created them. So what does the Bible really say about AI? Well, AI needs an ethical compass. AI is not life in the sense that humans are. We as humans may create AI, but humans stand alone as being created by God. AI does not bear the image of God. It has no soul. It cannot and does not respond to and relate with the living God. That too is unique to human beings. And no science, including AI, can answer the ultimate questions of life. And that's because the answers to the ultimate questions of life are not rooted in science, and they're not rooted in technology. They're rooted somewhere else. It reminds me of something Dr. Robert Jastrow once wrote. Jastrow was professor of astronomy at both Columbia University and Dartmouth College, director of the Mount Wilson Institute, manager of the Mount Wilson Observatory. For 20 years, he directed NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies, kind of a scientist's scientist. He had this to say about where the answers are really found. Let me quote him. He says, "For the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason, the story, finding answers to these questions, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance. He is about to conquer the highest peak. As he pulls himself over the final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries." Okay. There's a bit about how you take the Bible and you take something like AI and you let them talk to each other and you find out what the Bible really has to say about it. Well, 1 down, 4 to go. Next week, the 4th most requested topic you wanted explored in terms of what the Bible really says about it. And it's one I knew you were going to ask. And we'll tackle it. I just may need some security protection leaving the building after I'm done, or making sure that none of you track me down from this online campus. Until then, let me pray for you. Father, thank you so much for the fact that you did make us unique, that you created us, and we have such worth as a result, and that we were made in your image and have a soul that can respond to you, and it answers so many of our questions, and it tells us how unique we really are. And the most important thing, Father, is that it lets us be in relationship with you. And I pray that we would not squander that most unique, precious dynamic of being human, relating to you. Anyway, I hope this was helpful, Father, to all. And I pray it to you in the name of Jesus.